I'm sitting in my car outside Romano's Wine Bar on King Street in Alexandria, Virginia, watching my father through the window as he shakes hands with my husband, Tyler. They're laughing about something, probably sports or politics, completely comfortable with each other after 9 years of family dinners and golf weekends. What my father doesn't know is that I'm about to walk in there and destroy that comfortable relationship forever. What Tyler doesn't know is that my father called me 2 hours ago and said 5 words that changed everything. "We need to talk about Tyler." My hands are gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles have turned white, but I'm not crying. I'm calculating, because the message my father left made it very clear. He knows about the affair, and he has a plan to handle it that doesn't involve me leaving my cheating husband. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button now. Your support means everything to me, especially if you've ever had your own family choose someone else's comfort over your pain. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me explain how we got to this moment. I'm Harper, 32 years old, and I've been married to Tyler for 7 years. We met when I was 23 at a charity fundraiser in Georgetown, where he was networking for his father's law firm, and I was serving champagne to pay my way through graduate school. He was charming, ambitious, and came from the kind of established Washington, D.C. family that my working-class parents had always dreamed I'd marry into. Tyler's father was a senior partner at Whitmore and Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in the capital. His mother volunteered on museum boards and hosted senators at dinner parties. When Tyler proposed to me at the wharf overlooking the Potomac River, my parents cried with happiness. Finally, their daughter had made it. My father, specifically, worshipped Tyler. Dad had worked construction his entire life, building the monuments and office buildings that other people got credit for designing. He'd raised me and my brother on overtime pay and weekend shifts, always saying his sacrifices would give us better opportunities. When I brought Tyler home for the first time to our small house in Springfield, Dad was so nervous he changed his shirt 3 times. But Tyler was perfect that night. He asked Dad about his work, complimented Mom's cooking, and talked about how important blue-collar workers were to America's infrastructure. By the end of dinner, Dad was convinced I'd found a genuine, down-to-earth guy who just happened to come from money. Over the years, Tyler and Dad became genuinely close. They golfed together at Army-Navy Country Club, watched games at Buffalo Wild Wings in Ballston, and texted each other constantly. Which is why what I discovered 3 weeks ago felt like a double betrayal. I'd been working from home at our townhouse in Old Town when Tyler's Apple Watch, which he'd forgotten on the kitchen counter, started buzzing with messages. I normally wouldn't look, but the preview showed a woman's name I didn't recognize, Vanessa, with a message that said, "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" My stomach dropped. I picked up the watch and saw months of messages. Intimate messages. Plans to meet at the Beacon Hotel in DuPont Circle. Photos I definitely wasn't supposed to see. And what made it worse was the timeline. This had been going on for at least 8 months, maybe longer. 8 months of Tyler kissing me goodbye in the morning and texting another woman by afternoon. 8 months of lying directly to my face while I planned our future. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I did what any smart woman in 2024 would do. I gathered evidence. I recovered deleted messages from our iCloud backup. I checked our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels I'd never stayed at, and jewelry purchases I'd never received. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb who had an office above a coffee shop on M Street. He followed Tyler for 1 week and came back with photos that made me physically sick. Tyler and Vanessa having lunch at Founding Farmers. Tyler and Vanessa walking hand in hand through the National Arboretum. Tyler and Vanessa kissing in the parking garage of his office building at Farragut Square. The investigator's report was 30 pages long and cost me $3,000. It was worth every penny. I was planning my exit strategy. I'd consulted with a divorce attorney named Patricia Joe at Chen and Partners in Tyson's Corner. I'd started moving money from our joint account into a separate account Tyler didn't know about. I'd even started looking at apartments in Arlington where I could afford rent on just my salary as a grant writer for a nonprofit. I was 2 weeks away from serving him papers when my father called yesterday morning. "Honey, I need to see you today. It's about Tyler." Come to the house around 3. His voice sounded strange. Not angry, but serious in a way that made my chest tight. I drove to my parents' house in Springfield wondering if somehow Dad had found out on his own. Maybe Tyler had confessed to him. Maybe someone had seen them together and told my father. When I arrived, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table looking uncomfortable. Mom had been crying. Dad's jaw was clenched the way it gets when he's trying to control his temper. "Sit down, sweetheart," Dad said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, my heart pounding. "What's going on?" Mom reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "We found out something about Tyler, honey, something that's going to be hard to hear." I almost laughed. They had no idea I already knew. "What is it?" I asked, playing along. Dad pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was Tyler and Vanessa at the wharf, the same place he'd proposed to me 7 years ago. They were kissing. My father had photographic evidence of my husband's affair, which meant someone had sent it to him. "Who gave you this?" I asked quietly. "Tyler's brother, Austin," Dad said. "He's been worried about this for a while. He finally got proof and brought it to me yesterday because he didn't know how to tell you." Austin. Tyler's younger brother, who I'd always gotten along with, who I'd thought genuinely cared about me. He'd taken the information to my father instead of to me directly. That should have been my first warning sign. "I'm so sorry, baby," Mom said, squeezing my hand. "I know this must be devastating." I waited for them to ask what I wanted to do. I waited for Dad to say we'd support whatever decision I made. Instead, what came out of my father's mouth made my blood run cold. "I've already talked to Tyler. We're meeting tonight at Romano's to discuss how we're going to handle this situation." Handle the situation. Not support me through a divorce. Handle the situation. "What do you mean, handle the situation?" I asked slowly. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Honey, Tyler made a mistake, a big mistake, but he's a good man who's committed to fixing this. He wants to go to marriage counseling. He's willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." I stared at my father like I'd never seen him before. "You talked to Tyler about his affair before you talked to me. He called me as soon as Austin showed him the photo," Dad explained. "He was devastated that I'd found out. He broke down crying, Harper. He said he'd made the worst mistake of his life and he'd do anything to save his marriage. He loves you." "He loves me," I repeated flatly. "Yes, and I believe him. Men make mistakes, sweetheart. What matters is whether they're willing to fix them." Mom jumped in. "We're not saying what he did was right, honey. We're just saying that divorce should be the last option, not the first. You've built a life together. You have a beautiful home, good careers, and you've been talking about starting a family. Throwing all that away over one mistake seems hasty." One mistake. Like Tyler had accidentally left the toilet seat up instead of conducting an 8-month affair complete with romantic getaways and expensive gifts. "You want me to forgive him?" I said. It wasn't a question. Dad nodded. "I think you should at least hear him out. That's why I set up dinner tonight at Romano's. Neutral territory where the 3 of us can talk this through like adults." The 3 of us. My father, my husband, and me. The betrayed wife who apparently didn't get a say in whether this meeting even happened. I stood up from the table. "What time is dinner?" 7 o'clock, Dad said, looking relieved that I wasn't fighting him on this. "Good, I'll be there." I drove home in a daze. My father, the man who taught me to stand up for myself, who'd always told me I deserved respect, had just chosen my cheating husband over me. He'd met with Tyler privately, listened to his excuses, and decided on my behalf that our marriage was worth saving. He'd made plans for my future without consulting me about what I actually wanted, and my mother had gone along with it, more concerned about my beautiful home and good career than about my dignity or emotional well-being. When I got home, Tyler was already there, looking nervous. "Your dad told you," he said immediately. "He did." "Harper, I'm so sorry." I held up my hand. "Save it for tonight. I'll see you at Romano's at 7. I spent the afternoon at a Starbucks on Duke Street, drinking coffee and formulating my plan. Because here's what my father and Tyler had both failed to consider. I already knew about the affair. I'd known for 3 weeks. I'd spent those 3 weeks gathering evidence, consulting lawyers, and building my exit strategy. They thought they were controlling the narrative by getting ahead of my discovery. Instead, they just showed me exactly where everyone's loyalties actually lay. My father was more invested in maintaining his relationship with Tyler than in supporting his daughter. Tyler was more concerned with preserving his comfortable life than with the pain he'd caused me. And my mother was more worried about how a divorce would look to her church friends than about my actual happiness. They'd all underestimated me. Again, just like they'd underestimated me my entire life. At 6:45, I walked into Romano's wearing the red dress Tyler had bought me for our anniversary last year. The same anniversary where he'd been texting Vanessa between courses. The hostess led me to a private table in the back where Dad and Tyler were already seated, both nursing drinks and looking serious. They stood when they saw me. "Honey, you look beautiful," Dad said, kissing my cheek. Tyler tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "Let's just sit down." We ordered food none of us would eat and expensive wine that I planned to enjoy thoroughly. Dad cleared his throat. "Harper, Tyler has something he wants to say to you." I looked at my husband, this man I'd shared a bed with for 7 years, and felt absolutely nothing. "I'm listening." Tyler launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "Harper, I made a terrible mistake. I got caught up in attention from someone who meant nothing to me, and I lost sight of what actually matters. You, our marriage, our future together. Vanessa was a distraction during a stressful time at work, but she's not you. She could never be you. I've already ended things with her completely. I blocked her number. I'll change jobs if you want me to. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust." He reached across the table for my hand. I let him take it while I watched his performance. "I love you, Harper. I've loved you since the day we met. This affair was the stupidest thing I've ever done, and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll give me the chance." Dad was nodding along like Tyler was giving a closing argument in court. When Tyler finished, Dad jumped in. "What Tyler did was wrong, we all agree on that. But Harper, he's genuinely remorseful. He's willing to go to counseling, be completely transparent with you, and do the hard work of rebuilding trust. That's all you can ask for." I took a sip of my wine. "Is it? What do you mean?" Dad asked. "Is his willingness to go to counseling really all I can ask for? What about honesty? What about loyalty? What about basic respect?" Tyler squeezed my hand. "You're right, you deserve all of those things, and I'm going to give them to you from now on." "From now on," I repeated. "So for the past 8 months I didn't deserve honesty or loyalty or respect." His face went pale. "You know how long it's been?" Dad looked between us, confused. "Harper, how?" "I've known about the affair for 3 weeks," I said calmly. "I found messages on Tyler's Apple Watch. I hired a private investigator who documented everything. I have photos, financial records, hotel receipts, and a 30-page report detailing every lie Tyler's told me since February." The table went silent. "You knew," Tyler finally managed. "I knew, and I was planning to file for divorce next week. I'd already consulted with an attorney, started separating our finances, and found an apartment in Arlington. But then Dad called me yesterday saying he'd found out about the affair, and I got curious about how this would all play out." I turned to my father. "I wanted to see what you'd do, whether you'd support me or whether you'd do exactly what you did, meet with my husband behind my back and plan my future without me." Dad's face flushed. "Harper, I was trying to help. Help. You met with a man who betrayed me and decided on my behalf that I should forgive him. You didn't ask what I wanted. You didn't consider my feelings. You just assumed that keeping my marriage intact was more important than my dignity." "I thought I was giving you options," Dad protested. "No, Dad, you were protecting Tyler, just like you've always protected him. Do you know why? Because Tyler represents everything you wish you could have been. The fancy law degree, the country club membership, the parents who went to Yale instead of community college. You've spent 9 years living vicariously through my husband, and now you're more worried about losing your golf buddy than about the fact that he destroyed your daughter's trust." The accusation hung in the air. Dad looked like I'd slapped him. Tyler tried to recover. "Harper, your father was just trying to mediate." "Stop talking," I said quietly. "You don't get to defend him. You don't get to defend yourself. You had 8 months to be honest with me, and you chose to lie every single day. You took vows in front of 200 people promising to be faithful, and you broke those vows while I was at work writing grants to help underprivileged kids. You used our joint credit card to buy jewelry for your mistress while I was clipping coupons to save money for the house renovation you said we needed." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd saved everything. I have evidence of 43 hotel visits, 17 restaurant dates, 6 jewelry purchases totaling $8,000, and my personal favorite, the weekend trip to Charlottesville that you told me was a law conference. I turned the phone so they could both see the photos my investigator had taken. Tyler and Vanessa at a bed and breakfast in the mountains, holding hands and looking at each other like newlyweds. "You told me you were networking," I said. "You posted on Instagram about continuing legal education. You called me every night before bed and told me you missed me, and the entire time you were playing house with another woman." Tyler was crying now, real tears, not the manipulative kind. "I'm so sorry, Harper. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing else to say. I'm filing for divorce. I already have an attorney. You'll be served with papers by Friday." Dad finally found his voice. "Harper, don't make a decision you'll regret just because you're angry right now." I laughed, actually laughed. "I'm not angry, Dad. I'm done." "You need to think about this rationally," Dad pushed. "Tyler made a mistake, but divorce will impact your whole life. Your finances, your social circle, your future. You'll have to start over from scratch." "Good," I said. "I want to start over. Away from a man who thinks so little of me that he'd rather lie than have an honest conversation. Away from in-laws who value reputation over character. And apparently, away from parents who think my worth is tied to whether I can keep a man, even when that man treats me like garbage." Mom had been silent this whole time, but now she spoke up. "Harper, you're being dramatic. Marriage requires forgiveness." "Marriage requires honesty, Mom. Tyler didn't give me honesty. He gave me 8 months of calculated deception while making plans for our future that he knew was built on lies. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." I stood up from the table, pulling my hand away from Tyler's grip. "I'm leaving now. Tyler, you can sleep on the couch tonight, or better yet, get a hotel room. By tomorrow afternoon, the locks will be changed at the townhouse. Everything that belongs to you will be boxed up and left with the building manager. I'll communicate with you only through my attorney from this point forward." "Harper, please," he begged. "We can fix this." "No, Tyler, you can't fix this. You can't uncheat. You can't unlie. And you definitely can't undo the fact that when caught, your first instinct was to run to my father instead of to me. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." I looked at my father one last time. "And Dad, I'm disappointed. I spent my whole life trying to make you proud, and it turns out you're prouder of my husband than you are of me." I walked out of Romano's into the cool Virginia evening and felt lighter than I had in months. My phone started ringing immediately. Tyler, Mom, Dad, even Austin calling to explain his role in all this. I ignored them all and drove straight to Tessa's apartment in Rosslyn. Tessa had been my best friend since college, and she was the only person I'd told about discovering the affair. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "You did it." "I did it," I confirmed. We opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion, and I told her everything. About the ambush dinner, about my father's betrayal, about Tyler's crocodile tears and performative remorse. "I can't believe your own father tried to guilt you into staying," Tessa said, shaking her head. "I can," I replied. "He's always valued status over substance." The next morning, I called Patricia Joe, my divorce attorney. "I want to move forward with everything immediately. I want this divorce to be as fast and as final as possible." "Understood," Patricia said. "Given the documented adultery and the financial misconduct, using marital funds for the affair, we're in a very strong position. Virginia allows for fault-based divorce, which means you'll likely get a favorable settlement." Over the next week, I executed every part of my exit plan. I transferred my half of our savings into my own account. I moved my personal belongings out of the townhouse into a storage unit. I changed my emergency contacts, my beneficiaries, and my last name back to my maiden name on all non-legal documents. I even blocked my parents' phone numbers after my mother left me 17 voicemails begging me to reconsider this rash decision. Rash. Like I hadn't spent 3 weeks carefully planning every detail of my departure. The hardest part wasn't leaving Tyler. It was accepting that my father had shown me who he really was, and I'd finally believed him. Dad sent me a long email trying to explain his actions. He wrote about how he'd built his whole life around providing for his family, and seeing me married to someone, successful and stable, had felt like validation that his sacrifices meant something. Losing the son-in-law who'd become like a son to him, felt like losing proof that he'd done something right with his life. It was the most honest my father had ever been with me, and it changed nothing, because even in his explanation it was still about him. His feelings, his needs, his validation. I forwarded the email to my therapist without responding. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Tyler had tried to fight it initially, but Patricia had crushed him with evidence. 6 months after that dinner at Romano's, I'm sitting in my new apartment in Clarendon, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise through my bedroom window. My place is small, just one bedroom. One bathroom and a kitchen barely big enough for one person, but it's mine. Every piece of furniture I chose myself. Every paint color reflects my taste, not Tyler's. I've started dadding again, cautiously, after my therapist helped me work through my trust issues. And just last week, I got promoted at work to Director of Development, a position that comes with a significant raise and my own staff. My mother calls occasionally, always leading with, "Your father wants to reach out but doesn't know how," and I always respond the same way. If Dad wants to talk to me, he knows my number, but he needs to understand that our relationship will never be what it was. He chose Tyler over me, and I remember that. As for Tyler, I heard through mutual friends that he's engaged to someone new. Not Vanessa. Apparently she wanted nothing to do with him once she realized he was broke after the divorce settlement. Someone else entirely, probably someone who doesn't know his history. I feel nothing when I hear his name anymore. Not anger, not sadness, just a mild curiosity about how I ever thought he was worth 7 years of my life. The woman I was in that bridal suite planning a future with a cheater feels like a stranger to me now. I've learned that sometimes the people who claim to have your best interests at heart are really just protecting their own comfort. I've learned that forgiveness isn't owed to people who aren't genuinely sorry, just sorry they got caught. And I've learned that walking away from everything familiar can be terrifying and liberating in equal measure. My father's plan was for me to forgive Tyler, save my marriage, and preserve the family dynamic that made him feel successful. My reaction, choosing myself over everyone's expectations, ruined everything they'd planned. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made. I'm Harper. I'm 32 years old. And for the first time in my life, I'm building a future based on what I want, not what everyone else thinks I should want. That future might look smaller and less impressive from the outside. But from where I'm sitting, watching the sun rise over Arlington, it looks absolutely perfect. The story you've just heard happens more often than you think. Families pressuring women to forgive cheaters because divorce seems messier than betrayal. I'm sharing this to remind you that your peace matters more than other people's comfort. If you were Harper, would you have given Tyler a second chance? Would you have maintained your relationship with your father, or would you have walked away from everyone who failed you? I want to know your thoughts because every story shared helps someone else find their courage. God bless you, and may you always have the strength to choose your dignity over other people's expectations. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I'm leaving you with one of the most powerful channels for real-life revenge stories, King's Revenge Vault. Every story there will remind you that you're stronger than you think. Thank you for staying with me until this moment, and remember, you are not responsible for fixing what other people broke.